Have you ever felt invisible, yet known deep down that your smallest act could change a life forever? Picture a frosty morning in rural Indiana, where the first snowflakes of winter blanket Willow Creek High School, a modest red brick building nestled in a quiet town. The air bites at your skin, sharp and unrelenting, but inside, the halls hum with warmth, not just from the old, rattling radiators, but from the silent dedication of one man who arrives long before the first bell. Meet Henry Carter, 62, the school janitor, whose mop glides across the faded linoleum with a rhythm that's become his heartbeat after 24 years of service. Each morning, Henry clears the snow-dusted walkways, checks the flickering lights, and ensures every classroom is ready, his work unnoticed but essential. Since losing his wife, Clara, to illness 6 years ago, and with his daughter Emily serving overseas, this school has become his refuge, his purpose, a place where he can keep the world steady while his own feels so fragile. Today, on Veterans Day, something extraordinary is about to unfold, a moment that will ripple through generations. As Henry, will you quietly prepare the gym for the assembly, or will you notice a struggling veteran at the entrance and step in to help? Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe to Daily Narrated Stories for more heartwarming tales that remind us of the power of kindness. Henry's face carries the weight of years, lines carved deep by time and grief, his once black hair now streaked with silver, glinting under the fluorescent lights. His daughter's absence weighs heavily, her last letter tucked in his pocket, a fragile tether to the family he holds dear. Around his neck, beneath his faded uniform, hangs a silver chain with 3 treasures: his wedding ring, a tiny photo of Emily at age 9, her wide smile frozen in time, and her first set of dog tags, cold against his skin. He only looks at them during his lunch break, a private ritual in the dim maintenance closet, where he whispers a prayer for her safety, the scent of cleaning supplies mingling with his quiet hopes. Veterans Day at Willow Creek High means a special assembly, and Henry has spent extra time polishing the gymnasium floors, the wood gleaming under his careful hands, setting up rows of chairs for the families of students who've served. He feels a familiar ache in his chest. His grandfather fought in World War II, his uncle in Vietnam, and now Emily carries the family legacy halfway across the globe, her boots treading paths he can only imagine. Though Henry never served due to a heart condition in his youth, his respect for those in uniform runs deep, a reverence passed down through stories told by firelight. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," calls Mrs. Thompson, the first teacher to arrive, her smile fleeting as she hurries past, her heels clicking on the linoleum. Henry nods, unbothered by her rush, the scent of her floral perfume lingering in the air. He knows his role here, vital yet unseen, a shadow that keeps the school running. Students sometimes call him the broom guy, or that old man with the keys, their words once sharp enough to sting. But now they simply remind him of the days when Emily would leap into his arms after his shift, her laughter filling their small home, her tiny hands tugging at his uniform. As he adjusts a banner in the gym that reads "Honoring Our Heroes," the fabric rough under his fingertips, he wonders if anyone will notice the care he's put into today. The assembly is about to begin, and the air buzzes with anticipation, a quiet hum that promises something more. Henry moves through the gymnasium with the quiet precision of a man who knows every creak in the floorboards, every flicker in the lights. He adds extra chairs as requested by Ms. Harper, the event coordinator, who barely looks up from her clipboard, her pen scratching furiously, her brow furrowed with stress. "More on the east side, please, Mr. Carter," she says, her voice clipped, her focus elsewhere. "Right away, ma'am," Henry replies, his tone steady as he heads to the storage room, the scent of old wood and dust filling his nostrils, a familiar comfort in the midst of his solitude. The students will arrive soon, their laughter and footsteps echoing through the halls. But for now, the school belongs to him, a sanctuary of order he's crafted with his own hands over 24 years. He straightens the banner one last time, his calloused fingers brushing against the embroidered words "Honoring Our Heroes." The fabric feels rough under his touch, and he pauses, a memory stirring deep within him. He's 10 years old again, standing in his grandfather's small garage, the air thick with the smell of leather polish, the faint crackle of a radio playing in the background. His grandfather, a World War II veteran, kneels beside him, showing him how to shine a pair of boots, his hands steady despite their age. "It's not just about the shine, Henry," his grandfather had said, his voice gravelly but warm, his eyes distant with memory. "It's about honoring the man who wears them, the battles he's fought, the ones he's lost." Henry blinks back the memory, his chest tightening with a familiar ache, the scent of polish still lingering in his mind. He imagines Emily in a dusty uniform halfway across the world, her boots caked with sand from a desert he'll never see. Does anyone there polish her boots, he wonders, or offer her a moment of kindness amidst the chaos? He shakes his head, pushing the thought away, and adjusts the banner one last time, ensuring it hangs perfectly straight, the red and blue threads vibrant against the gym's muted walls. The assembly is set to start in 15 minutes, and the gymnasium begins to hum with anticipation. Students trickle in, their backpacks slung over their shoulders, their voices a chaotic symphony of excitement. More about the shortened school day than the occasion itself, their sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. Henry stations himself near the entrance, his eyes scanning for any last-minute issues. A flickering light in the corner, a sticky door that needs a quick fix, a chair that's wobbled loose. He's always ready, always prepared, a silent guardian of the school's rhythm. The air smells faintly of pine cleaner, a scent that's become as familiar to him as his own breath, mingling with the faint sweetness of the students' packed lunches. That's when he sees him, an elderly man hesitating at the doorway, his weathered navy blue jacket adorned with faded military patches, each stitch a testament to a life of service. His back is bent but proud, his thinning gray hair tucked beneath a veteran's cap that reads Korean War veteran, the embroidery frayed but bold. His boots, once shined military issue, are now crusted with mud and slush from the snowy parking lot, the leather cracked and worn, as if they've carried the weight of decades. The man clutches a crumpled note in his trembling hand, his pale blue eyes scanning the crowd with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "Excuse me," he asks a passing student, his voice soft but steady, carrying the faint tremor of age. "Is this the Veterans Day Assembly?" The teenager, a lanky boy with earbuds dangling from his neck, shrugs without breaking stride. "Yeah, I guess," he mutters, his attention already back on his phone, his indifference a sharp contrast to the veteran's quiet dignity. Two girls nearby snicker, their voices sharp and careless, their phones raised to capture the moment. "Is that a homeless guy?" One whispers loudly, her friend giggling behind her hand. "Someone should call security." Henry watches from his post, his hands tightening around the handle of his broom, the wood smooth under his grip. The words sting, not for him, but for the man who stands there, his dignity under siege, his shoulders hunching slightly under the weight of their judgment. He sees the school security guard, Tom, narrow his eyes, his hand resting on the radio at his hip, his posture tense. "Sir, do you have a visitor's pass?" Tom calls out, his tone sharp, cutting through the chatter of the arriving students, his voice echoing in the high-ceilinged gym. The veteran's shoulders slump further, his fingers fumbling with the note in his hand, the paper crinkling softly. "I'm here to see my granddaughter," he explains, his voice quivering with age but holding a quiet strength, a resilience forged in battle. "She's in the choir, singing a solo today. Her name's Lily." Tom frowns, his expression unyielding, his hand still on the radio. "All visitors need to check in at the main office first. School policy." The old man looks defeated, his hands tightening around his cap as if it's the only thing anchoring him, the fabric worn and faded. "I'm sorry, I didn't know," he says softly, his voice barely audible over the growing noise of the students. "My daughter dropped me off, and I thought." His voice trails off, and Henry feels a surge of protectiveness, a memory flashing through his mind like a lightning strike. His grandfather, years ago, standing tall in his uniform, his eyes misty as he recounted a story of a comrade who never made it home, his hands trembling as he held a faded photograph. "Always honor those who've walked the hard path, son," his grandfather had said, his voice rough but kind, his hands steady as he polished his own boots, the scent of polish sharp in the air. Henry's heart pounds, a mix of duty and empathy propelling him forward, his boots echoing softly on the polished floor as he moves toward the veteran. "I can vouch for him," Tom," he says firmly, his voice cutting through the tension, steady despite the rapid beat of his heart. "He's here for the ceremony." Tom hesitates, his eyes flicking between Henry and the veteran, then nods reluctantly, his hand dropping from the radio. "Fine, Henry. Your call." As the veteran steps inside, Henry notices him glance down at his muddy boots, a flicker of shame crossing his weathered face as they leave faint tracks on the freshly polished floor, the mud smearing in small, dark streaks. The old man tries to scuff the mud off on the mat, but it only smears further, and Henry can see the embarrassment in his tightened jaw, the way his hands tremble more now, his fingers clutching the cap like a lifeline. "Sir," Henry says softly, guiding him to a nearby bench with a gentle hand on his arm, the fabric of the veteran's jacket rough under his touch. "Let me help you with those." The veteran looks startled, his pale eyes widening, a mix of surprise and vulnerability in his gaze. "With what, son?" he asks, his voice a low murmur, heavy with years. Henry gestures to the boots, his voice steady but warm, a quiet reassurance in his tone. "They've seen better days. Mind if I clean them up before the ceremony?" The veteran's face softens, a mix of surprise and gratitude flickering in his eyes. But there's something else there too. Pain, memory, a story Henry can't yet know, a shadow that lingers in the lines of his face. "No one's touched these boots in 70 years, he murmurs, his voice thick with emotion, barely above a whisper, his eyes distant as if he's seeing another time, another place. "Not since my buddy cleaned them for me in '53, before he didn't make it back from Korea. We were in a foxhole the night before a big push," he said. "Robert, you gotta look sharp, even in hell." He didn't make it through the next day. The words hang in the air, heavy with loss, each syllable a testament to a bond forged in the crucible of war, and Henry feels a lump rise in his throat, his eyes stinging with unshed tears. He kneels down, his cleaning supplies at the ready, the scent of leather cleaner sharp in his nose as he begins to work, the cold water seeping into his fingers as he wipes away the caked mud with a damp cloth. He applies the cleaner, his movements steady and reverent, as if he's polishing not just boots, but a piece of history, a monument to the men who wore them. A few students slow to stare, their sneakers squeaking on the floor, one boy pulling out his phone to record, snickering with his friends, his laughter sharp and mocking. "Is that what they pay the janitor for?" Another mutters loudly, his voice dripping with mockery, the words cutting through the hum of the gym. Henry doesn't look up, his focus unwavering, his hands moving with a quiet purpose. In his mind, he sees Emily, her boots dusty from a far-off desert, her laughter a distant memory, her face a beacon in his thoughts. He wonders if she's safe, if she's lonely, if anyone there sees her the way he sees this veteran now, if anyone offers her a moment of kindness in the chaos. He thinks of his grandfather, who taught him that respect is in the small things, polishing a boot, offering a hand, seeing the person others overlook, the lessons etched into his soul like the lines on his hands. The veteran, Colonel Robert Brooks, sits still, watching Henry's hands with a quiet awe, his breath shallow as if he's holding back a flood of memories, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. 35 years in the army, he says softly, his voice a low rumble, each word heavy with the weight of decades. Marched through mud, snow, jungles. These boots have carried me through hell and back. Korea, then later, training young soldiers stateside. I kept them as a reminder of the men who didn't come home, the ones I promised I'd never forget. Henry nods, feeling the weight of those words settle into his bones, a shared understanding passing between them, unspoken but profound. The leather begins to shine under his careful hands, the cracks in the surface telling a story of their own, each scuff a chapter in a life of service. As he buffs the leather to a soft gleam, the shine reflecting the overhead lights, he notices a faint insignia on the side of each boot, the same unit Emily serves in now, the emblem a small but striking connection across time. A chill runs down his spine, the coincidence feeling like a whisper from the universe, a thread tying him to his daughter, to this man, to a legacy he's never fully understood. "Perfect timing, sir," Henry says, standing as the first notes of the national anthem echo through the gym, the sound swelling with pride and reverence, the melody wrapping around them like a warm embrace. You're all set." The veteran rises slowly, his movements stiff but deliberate, his eyes misty as he looks at his restored boots, the shine a mirror to his past. "I don't think I deserve this kind of kindness anymore," he whispers, his voice breaking slightly, a tear slipping down his weathered cheek. Henry helps him to the veteran's seating area, his hand steady on the old man's arm, the warmth of his touch a quiet reassurance. "It's not about deserving, sir," he says, his voice firm but gentle, a promise in his words. "It's about remembering." As they part, neither man notices Principal Margaret Evans watching from across the room, her brow furrowed with concern, her glasses slipping down her nose. She adjusts them, her lips pursed as she mutters to herself, "I can't believe there are still people as good as Henry in this world." She turns to a nearby teacher, her voice low but filled with awe. "Did you see that?" He didn't even hesitate. After the assembly, Henry returns to his duties, emptying trash cans, rearranging chairs, his mind still on the veteran's words, the weight of that shared insignia lingering like a ghost, a connection he can't shake. The gymnasium empties slowly, the students' chatter fading as they head to their next classes, leaving behind crumpled programs and stray candy wrappers, the air heavy with the scent of sweat and paper. Henry sweeps the floor methodically, the broom's bristles whispering against the wood, but his thoughts are far away, tangled in memories of Emily, of his grandfather, of the veteran's quiet gratitude. He's inspecting a wobbly table leg, his fingers tracing the splintered wood, the texture rough under his touch, when Principal Evans approaches, her heels clicking sharply on the floor, her presence a sudden intrusion in his quiet world. "Mr. Carter, a word?" Her tone is neutral, but Henry senses trouble, a knot forming in his stomach, his heart sinking as he braces himself for what's to come. They step into a quiet corner of the gym, a few teachers glancing their way, their whispers revealing they've been talking about him, their eyes sharp with curiosity. "Henry, you've been with us for over 2 decades, and we value your dedication," she begins, adjusting her glasses, her eyes avoiding his, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Henry nods, waiting for the inevitable, but his heart sinking further, a cold dread settling in his chest. "However," she continues, her voice measured, each word carefully chosen, "some staff raised concerns about what happened today. You bypassed security protocols by vouching for an unregistered visitor, and then there's the matter of physical contact." Henry blinks, confusion clouding his thoughts, his brow furrowing. "Physical contact," he repeats, his voice low, almost disbelieving, the words foreign on his tongue. She lowers her voice, her tone cautious, her eyes finally meeting his. "Kneeling at someone's feet, handling their belongings. It could be misinterpreted in today's climate. Some parents might see it as inappropriate." Henry's chest tightens, a mix of frustration and hurt rising like a tide, his hands clenching at his sides. He thinks of Emily, wondering if she'd be ashamed of him now, if he somehow failed her by stepping out of line, if his small act of kindness has brought her dishonor. "I was honoring a veteran on Veterans Day," he says, his voice firmer than he expected, a quiet defiance in his tone, his eyes steady despite the storm inside him. Ms. Larson, a history teacher hovering nearby, chimes in, her arms crossed, her voice sharp. "It was a bit dramatic, Henry. Some students recorded it. We're worried about the optics, how it looks to the community, what parents might think." Henry looks between them, the weight of their words pressing down on him, a heavy burden he hadn't anticipated. He hadn't meant to cause a scene. He'd just seen a man who needed help, whose dignity needed restoring, a man who reminded him of his own family sacrifices. But now he understands. It's not that he helped someone. It's that he stepped out of his invisible role, reminded everyone that the janitor is a person with thoughts, feelings, and values, a man who feels deeply in a world that often looks away. "I understand," he says quietly, though he doesn't. Not really, his voice heavy with resignation, his shoulders slumping slightly. "Next time, please direct visitors to the front office," Principal Evans suggests, her tone softening slightly, as if she senses his hurt, her eyes softening with a hint of regret. "And leave the ceremonial aspects to the program we've planned." Henry nods, a heaviness settling over him like a winter fog, his heart aching with a quiet sorrow. "May I finish my work here?" he asks, his voice barely above a whisper, his eyes fixed on the floor. Of course, she replies, her expression softening further, a flicker of guilt in her gaze. And Henry, we do appreciate all you do. The words feel empty, hollow, as he picks up his broom, his movements mechanical, his mind a storm of doubt and regret, the broom's bristles scraping softly against the wood. For the first time in years, Henry leaves school early, signing out at 3 o'clock instead of his usual 5:30, the drive to his small apartment feeling endless, the world outside a blur of white and gray. The snow has started falling again, soft flakes catching in the windshield of his old truck, the wipers squeaking rhythmically as he drives, the sound a steady counterpoint to his racing thoughts. His apartment is a modest one-bedroom, the walls lined with faded photos of Emily and Clara, their smiles a bittersweet reminder of brighter days. The air inside smells faintly of coffee and old books, a comforting scent that usually soothes him. But tonight it does little to ease the ache in his chest, the weight of the day pressing down on him like a physical force. He sits at the worn table where a framed photo of Emily sits beside Clara's knitting needles, their bright red handles a stark contrast to the muted tones of the room, a splash of color in a world that feels gray. He pulls out Emily's latest letter, the paper soft from countless readings, the ink smudged in places where his fingers have lingered too long, her handwriting a lifeline to the daughter he misses so fiercely. Dad, it's hard here, but knowing you're keeping things steady at home keeps me going. If you see someone who's served, someone forgotten, show them they're not alone. Henry traces her words, the day's events pressing down on him like a physical weight, each letter a reminder of the promise he tried to keep. He hadn't meant to draw attention. He just wanted to honor a man who'd sacrificed so much, to do for someone else what he can't do for Emily right now, to bridge the distance between them with a single act of kindness. The phone rings, startling him, the shrill sound cutting through the silence of the apartment, his heart jumping in his chest. Probably a scam call, he thinks, but answers anyway, his hand trembling slightly, a flicker of hope mingling with his fear. Is this Henry Carter? A deep voice asks, authoritative but warm, a voice that carries the weight of command. Yes, sir, Henry replies, his throat dry, a flicker of fear igniting in his chest, his mind racing with possibilities. This is Captain Daniel Brooks. I believe you met my grandfather today, Colonel Robert Brooks, retired. Henry's heart skips a beat, the veteran's face flashing in his mind, the memory of those boots vivid and sharp. The veteran at the school? Yes, Captain Brooks says, his voice softening, a note of gratitude in his tone, a warmth that eases Henry's fear. He called me this afternoon, deeply touched by your kindness. Those boots, no one's touched them since he came back from Korea. They were the last thing his best friend cleaned before he died in battle. Henry closes his eyes, overwhelmed, the significance of his small act hitting him like a wave, a tidal force of emotion that threatens to sweep him away. He asked me to thank you properly. Captain Brooks continues, his words steady but filled with emotion. I hope that's okay. There's no need. Henry insists, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes stinging with tears. I just did what felt right. That's exactly why it matters. The captain replies, his words firm but kind, a quiet affirmation of Henry's worth. Not everyone would. Will you be at the school tomorrow morning? Henry arrives at Willow Creek High the next morning at 5 a.m. The sky still dark, the stars fading into the dawn, their light a faint promise of the day to come. His conversation with Captain Brooks left him restless, the captain's vague request, be sure to come to work, echoing in his mind like a riddle, a puzzle he can't solve. As he pulls into the parking lot, he hears a faint crackle of radio chatter from the shadows. Target confirmed, proceed to courtyard. His stomach twists, a cold dread settling in his bones, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Is this about Emily? Has something happened overseas? His hands tremble as he parks his battered truck, the engine ticking as it cools in the frosty air, the sound a stark contrast to the pounding of his heart. A uniformed officer approaches, his face unreadable in the dim light, his boots crunching on the snow, the sound sharp in the stillness. Mr. Carter? The officer asks, his voice calm but firm, his presence a sudden intrusion in the quiet morning. Henry nods, unable to speak, his mouth dry as sandpaper, his mind racing with fear. "I'm Major Ellis. Please come with me." Henry follows on shaky legs, his heart pounding as they round the corner to the main courtyard, the cold air biting at his exposed skin, his breath visible in the chilly dawn. He stops short, his breath catching in his throat, his eyes widening in disbelief. There, in perfect formation, stand 40 service members in dress uniforms, their faces solemn, their breath visible in the chilly morning air, their presence a silent testament to honor. Behind them, 4 military vehicles are parked in a precise line, their engines idling softly, an American flag flying from a temporary pole in the center, its stars and stripes vivid against the gray sky, the fabric snapping softly in the wind. Captain Brooks stands at attention beside it, his insignia gleaming in the first light of dawn, his posture rigid with purpose. What is this?" Henry stammers, his voice barely audible, his hands clenching at his sides, his heart racing with a mix of fear and awe. Major Ellis smiles faintly, a glimmer of warmth in his eyes, a quiet reassurance in his gaze. "Just wait, sir." Early arriving teachers gather at the entrance, whispering, their breath fogging in the cold, their eyes wide with curiosity. Principal Evans pushes through, her face a mix of confusion and alarm, her scarf fluttering in the wind, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Excuse me, what's happening here?" she demands, her voice rising over the murmur of the crowd, a note of panic in her tone. "Do you have authorization?" Captain Brooks steps forward, his posture rigid, his voice commanding, cutting through the tension like a blade. "We have clearance from the Department of Defense, ma'am. We're here for Henry Carter." All eyes turn to Henry, who feels the ground shift beneath him, his knees weak, his breath shallow. "Is there a problem?" Principal Evans asks, her voice rising, a note of panic creeping in, her eyes darting between the soldiers and Henry. "No problem," Captain Brooks replies, his tone steady, his presence a calming force. Turning to Henry, he calls out, "Attention!" The service members snap to attention, their movements sharp and synchronized, the sound of their boots echoing like a drumbeat, a powerful rhythm that fills the courtyard. Captain Brooks approaches Henry, stopping at a precise distance, and salutes, his hands steady, his eyes locked on Henry's, a silent acknowledgement of respect. "Mr. Carter, on behalf of the United States Armed Forces and the veterans of this community, I present you with this flag." A female soldier steps forward, holding a folded American flag in a perfect triangle, the fabric crisp and heavy in her hands, the stars and stripes a vivid reminder of sacrifice. "This flag flew over our base in Iraq, where your daughter is stationed," Captain Brooks explains, his voice carrying across the courtyard, each word a testament to the legacy Henry is part of. "And before that, it flew in Korea, where my grandfather served." Henry's vision blurs with tears, his hands trembling as he reaches out to accept the flag, its weight grounding him even as his emotions threaten to overwhelm him, the fabric cool against his skin. "I don't understand," he whispers, his voice breaking, a mix of awe and confusion in his tone. "My grandfather told us what you did," Captain Brooks says, his voice strong but laced with emotion, resonating across the now silent courtyard, the weight of his words settling over the crowd. "How you knelt down without hesitation to clean the boots he's kept as a memorial for 70 years. How you showed him respect when others saw only an old man in the way." Students begin to arrive, their usual chatter fading into a stunned silence, their eyes wide as they take in the scene, their backpacks forgotten at their sides. "The military is built on respect," Captain Brooks continues, his words deliberate, each one landing like a stone in still water, rippling outward. "Respect for those who came before, for sacrifices we may never fully know. Yesterday, you didn't just clean a pair of boots, you honored every step my grandfather took for this country." The soldier hands Henry the flag, his hands shaking as he accepts it, the fabric a tangible link to Emily, a piece of her he can hold while she's so far away. "We'd also like to present you with this," Captain Brooks adds, offering a small box containing a unit coin, bearing the insignia of both his grandfather's Korean War unit and Emily's current unit, the metal cool and heavy in Henry's palm. "This connects 3 generations, my grandfather, your daughter, and the legacy that binds us." Principal Evans steps to Henry's side, her earlier concerns forgotten, her face softened with a mix of awe and guilt, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Mr. Carter has been an invaluable part of our school for over 20 years, she announces loudly, as if she'd always supported him, her voice carrying to the growing crowd, a note of pride in her tone. Henry barely hears her, his focus on the flag, its weight a tangible link to Emily, a piece of her he can hold, the stars and stripes a reminder of the sacrifices that connect them. "I didn't do anything special," he says finally, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes fixed on the flag, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I just saw someone who deserved respect." "That's exactly what makes it special," Captain Brooks replies, his tone firm but warm, his eyes steady with admiration. "Seeing the person others overlook, recognizing the value others miss." The service members render a final salute, their movements precise, a powerful gesture of honor, and students begin to applaud, the sound swelling across the courtyard, a wave of sound that echoes off the brick walls, a spontaneous outpouring of respect. Principal Evans leans toward Henry, her voice low, a hint of a smile on her lips. "I think we need to reschedule your performance review," she says quietly, her tone softer now, a note of respect in her words. "Perhaps with a discussion about a long overdue promotion." Henry nods absently, still processing the moment, the flag heavy in his hands, the coin a small but significant weight in his pocket, his heart full with a mix of pride and humility. The events transform Willow Creek High in subtle but meaningful ways, a quiet shift that ripples through the school like a gentle wave. The following week, Principal Evans announces a new service and respect initiative, with Henry as its honorary chair, her voice filled with pride as she speaks to the assembled staff, her words a testament to the change Henry has inspired. The first project, a monthly breakfast for local veterans in the school cafeteria, a chance for them to gather, share stories, and feel seen, the scent of coffee and bacon filling the air as laughter and memories echo through the space. Henry continues his janitorial duties with the same quiet dedication, fixing leaky pipes and loose tiles, the scent of sawdust and metal a constant in his days. But something has shifted, a change he feels in the air around him. Teachers now greet him by name, their smiles genuine, their voices warm, a newfound respect in their eyes. Students occasionally help him carry supplies, holding doors open with shy smiles, their respect a quiet but tangible change, a small gesture that means the world to Henry. The flag and coin are displayed in a glass case near the entrance, a plaque reading, "Respect is not earned, it is given," the words a quiet reminder of the lesson Henry has taught them all. 3 months later, Henry is sweeping the cafeteria after lunch, the smell of pizza and cleaning solution lingering in the air, the hum of the school a comforting backdrop, when a senior, Ethan Hayes, lingers nearby. Ethan, a star basketball player, is usually surrounded by friends, his laughter a constant in the halls. But today he's alone, his expression hesitant, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his sneakers scuffing the floor. "Mr. Carter, can I talk to you?" he asks, his voice low, almost nervous, a vulnerability in his tone that catches Henry off guard. Henry sets down his broom, the handle cool against his palm, his eyes meeting Ethan's with a gentle warmth. "Of course, Ethan," he says, his tone gentle, sensing the boy's unease, his heart open to whatever the boy needs to share. The boy shifts nervously, his sneakers scuffing the floor, his eyes darting to the side before meeting Henry's again. "I enlisted last week. Marines. I ship out after graduation," he says, his voice quiet but firm, a note of pride beneath his nerves. Henry raises an eyebrow, a mix of surprise and admiration in his gaze, his heart swelling with respect for the boy's choice. "That's a big step. Your family must be proud." Ethan looks down, his jaw tight, his hands clenching in his pockets. "My mom's not thrilled. She wanted me to take the basketball scholarship. But after what happened with that veteran and all those soldiers showing up for you, I started thinking about what really matters, about what I want my life to mean." Henry listens, sensing there's more, his hands resting on the broom as he gives Ethan his full attention, his presence a quiet anchor for the boy. "I've been watching you all year," Ethan continues, his voice gaining strength, his eyes meeting Henry's with a newfound resolve. "Even before that day, the way you fix things without making a fuss, The way you treat everyone with respect, even when they don't see you, even when they don't deserve it. I want to live like that, like how you clean those boots, doing what's right because it's right, not for attention, not for praise. Henry feels a lump in his throat, the boy's words touching a part of him he thought had long gone quiet, a part of him that had forgotten what it felt like to be seen. That's a good way to live, Ethan, he says, his voice steady but warm, a quiet pride in his tone. I hope I can serve with that same quiet honor you have. Ethan says, his voice firm now, his shoulders straightening, a determination in his eyes that mirrors the veterans Henry has come to admire. Henry extends his hand, which Ethan shakes firmly, his grip strong but respectful, a silent promise between them. You'll do fine, son, Henry says, finding his voice, a quiet pride swelling in his chest, his heart full with the knowledge that his actions have inspired another. Just remember, the most important things you'll do in uniform might be the small acts of kindness no one else sees. As Ethan walks away, his shoulders a little straighter, his steps more confident, Henry returns to his work, his steps lighter, a faint smile on his lips, a warmth in his chest that he hasn't felt in years. He thinks of Emily, due home in 2 weeks, her laughter already echoing in his mind, a sound he can't wait to hear again, and Colonel Brooks, who now attends every veteran's breakfast, often bringing other elderly veterans who'd been isolated for years, their stories filling the cafeteria with a warmth Henry never thought possible, a community forged through shared respect. That evening, as Henry locks up the West Wing, the keys jangling softly in his hand, he passes the display case with the flag, the glass reflecting the dim light of the hallway. He pauses, as he often does, to adjust it slightly, a habit from decades of ensuring everything is just right, the fabric of the flag a quiet reminder of the day that changed everything. Principal Evans finds him there, her footsteps soft on the linoleum, her presence a quiet comfort in the empty school. Heading home, Henry, she asks, her voice warm, a far cry from the tension of that Veterans Day morning. He nods, the keys cold in his hand. Just finishing up. She hesitates, then speaks, her words careful but sincere. I never properly apologized for how I reacted that day. I was so focused on rules and appearances, I missed the lesson you were teaching us all, the lesson we all needed to learn. Henry shakes his head, his smile small but genuine, the weight of her words lifting a burden he hadn't realized he was carrying. No apology needed. We all do our best. Your best has changed this school, she says simply, her eyes meeting his with a newfound respect, a quiet acknowledgement of his impact. See you tomorrow. As Henry walks to his truck in the empty parking lot, the snow crunching under his boots, he looks up at the stars piercing the twilight sky, their light a faint echo of the hope in his heart. Somewhere under those same stars, Emily is counting down the days to come home, her laughter a promise on the horizon. Somewhere else, an old veteran polishes his boots, perhaps thinking of comrades long gone, their memory kept alive through a simple act of kindness. And soon, a young man named Ethan will begin his own journey of service, carrying a lesson about respect no classroom could teach, a lesson learned from a janitor who saw what others couldn't. Henry didn't raise his voice. He simply knelt down and showed the world what honor truly means. Respect isn't found in loud speeches or grand gestures. Sometimes, it's in a quiet glance downward, a hand cleaning a pair of boots, a whispered, "Thank you for your service." Henry didn't do anything extraordinary, but he rekindled a fading value in our fast-paced world. Gratitude for those who've sacrificed, a gratitude that connects generations through the smallest acts of kindness. People like Henry don't seek recognition. They hope the next generation will watch and learn. This is what's right. This is what matters. The most powerful lessons come not from ceremonies, but from witnessing one person honor the dignity of another, a moment of connection that echoes through time. When was the last time you honored someone no one else saw? Share their story in the comments below to keep the spirit of respect alive, to remind us all of the power of seeing the unseen. Just 24 hours earlier, Henry had bent down beside an old man with muddy boots. No one noticed, no one cared, but someone remembered, and that memory changed everything. At Daily Narrated Stories, we believe in sharing real kindness, real courage, and real honor that never goes unnoticed. stories that remind us of the values that bind us together. Don't miss your chance to be part of our community. Subscribe now, hit that notification bell, and join us in celebrating the stories that remind us what truly matters. Time is fleeting, and these lessons are too precious to miss. Will you honor the unseen today?